Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Open Education Network. I'm Karen Lauritsen, Publishing Director with the OEN. I'm joined today by Barb Thies, our Community Manager, and Amy Song, Customer Success Manager for PressbookEDU. A little bit more about Amy. She is based in Montreal, and before joining Pressbooks, she worked as a Customer Experience Specialist and as a QA Specialist and Content Writer for two Montreal-based technology and e-commerce companies. Amy also spent more than 3 years as a translator and editor for the Diversity Times, a bilingual Korean-English newspaper focused on multiculturalism, published in Manitoba. Amy graduated from McGill University, where she studied chemistry. We invite you to say hello to us and one another in the chat. And when you do, if you could please include just a little snippet of information. We would like to know if you are coming into this workshop as wearing kind of an author hat. You are going to be the writer of a Pressbooks book, or if you are coming more as a project manager, librarian, someone who is supporting people who will be the primary writers using Pressbooks. That will be helpful for us to know. And feel free to include any other fun facts from your day. For example, I observed 2 orioles this morning in the backyard, which was delightful. Okay, for our time together today, we'll be exploring disciplinary and accessibility considerations for publishing with Pressbooks. That is the title of our session. Amy is going to demonstrate subject-specific approaches to creating content, as well as key accessibility features and best practices. This is a 90-minute session. It will include hands-on time for those of you who have access to Pressbooks and want to do some hands-on time. We're really glad that you're here. And of course, in addition to Amy's expertise, I know that there are many of you here with us today who have Pressbooks experience to share and that you can offer support to one another. So we invite you to join in, answer any questions that pop up in chat. Let us know your tips and tricks as we go along, and we're in it together. Feel free to share your questions in chat as we go or jump in. Amy said she is very casual with the session, so however you want to ask your questions, whenever you want to ask your questions. And without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Amy.
Thank you so much, Karen. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Amy, or I guess good afternoon. Kind of depends on which time zone you're in. Hi, everybody. My name is Amy. I am, as Karen said, the Customer Success Manager at Pressbooks. So excited that so many people have turned out to the session today. I am familiar with some of you, not all of you, and I'm really excited to meet all of you. Typically, I like to do a big round of introductions, but there are happily too many of you. So for today, I'm excited to read all of your bios in the chat. I'm so excited to see different faculty members and project managers and librarians and wonderful people who are interested in creating open educational content. Like Karen said, if you have any questions throughout the session, just feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Today's session will, as Karen had sent out in the email blast, assumes that you know a little bit about Pressbooks, not everything. Some of this material will be very familiar to some of you who are more experienced in Pressbooks, while it might be entirely new to some of you other folks. So the goal for today's session is to show you some examples of discipline-specific books. I am not an educator myself, but I'm very familiar with Pressbooks, and I know many of you are very knowledgeable in your respective disciplines or are very knowledgeable in supporting faculty regardless of their needs. So I hope that I will be able to sufficiently target all the things that you have questions about or might be interested in. The bulk of today's session will be showing you around Pressbooks and how you can use it to fit your needs. It is really a great tool if you are trying to adapt or create openly licensed content. So So yeah, I will say the session will probably be about, I want to ballpark 45 to 55 minutes long. We'll probably take about a 5-minute break so that, you know, anyone who needs to go for a bio break, get a sip of water, you will have that little window so that we don't go straight from me talking a bunch of, you know, for a long time directly into the session itself. But when you come back, I'll have a document prepared so that whoever is interested in the sandbox can read it and go through it. Everything that's going to be covered in the sandbox, I'll have covered in the session. So you'll have you'll receive a demonstration before you have to go through with it. So I just wanted to lay all of that out. So without further ado, I will share my screen and I can get started. I also just wanted to say a big thank you to Karen and Barb for having me. Okay, so this is sort of the perfect place to start. If you've been to one of my demos before, you'll know that I love starting with the guide. This is a Pressbooks user guide. It has over 90 chapters of excellent information that we've accumulated about Pressbooks over the past 4 to 5 years. 4 to 5, not 45. And we're actually really lucky because we just hired our newest support specialist. His name is Gavin. You might interact with him sometime in the future. He is amazing. He has a librarian background. He's librarian by study, and he was hired specifically to work on the guide as well as provide support. So this is really exciting for us. So there's only uphill from this guide that's already sort of a big collection of guide chapters written by lots of people who worked for Pressbooks before. So if you're interested in anything that I covered today, you can use the search bar or use Control F to find the topic that you might be looking for. And I'll share all the resources that I have at the end. So with that being said, I wanted to take you to our Pressbooks directory. This is sort of where all of our Pressbooks books live. There's over 2,500 books. We just passed the 2,500 book mark, which is super exciting, across 90 Pressbooks networks, so Open Education being one of them. I know many of you are from institutions that already have Pressbooks, so your institution will also be a part of that 98, and it's a really incredible place to come. Obviously, we're talking about it because it's a Pressbooks demo, but this is truly such a great place to find resources. And I would really highly encourage you to go look at other, OER repositories as well. I know that lots of different consortiums and organizations also offer a great list of openly licensed texts that you will be able to adapt from. So I just wanted to say that. And this is where, like I said, all of the published public content live. And we recently just started this new thing called Curated Collections. We have a Pressbooks librarian who goes and selects some incredible selections, and we've released our first batch of collections. So we have healthcare, interactive OER, accessibility, open education, and high enrollment courses. So if any of these appeal to you, then I'd really recommend that you have a look, especially if these are the kinds of disciplines that you're trying to adapt or to create in the next, however many number of months or years. Then these are great places to come to. We also have filters on the left-hand side. I already took the liberty of filtering the OEN network. So you can see that there's 7 books on the OEN network that's available on the directory. One of the parts about Sandbox is going through the filters and looking through the licenses and subjects and sorting and filtering to your needs to find the resources that you want. So I just wanted to highlight all of this first because even though, like I said, I don't work for an institution and I might not have the specific discipline related knowledge. The books sort of speak for themselves in a lot of ways, because by looking at, the 30 books that might be, available for OER specific content or open pedagogy specific content, then you can have a look through each of those books to see how specific people or specific institutions have laid out their book. So with that being said, I have prepared a couple of examples of many different sorts of disciplines that might be relevant for the session today. I tried to cover all bases. I was going to find a music example, but I completely forgot. So if you're in a music discipline, I would recommend that you use the subject filter or the license filter to look for something that you can use. So firstly is an introduction to community psychology book. What I love so much about this book, so I will go through all of them and I will sort of explain why I've chosen this example and why I feel that this might be helpful for me to show during the session. So firstly is the introduction to community psychology book. This book is from the Rebus community who do some incredible work around producing openly licensed content. And what I love so much about this book is not only because of the subject of the book itself, but it's the way that they have laid out their book. So Apurva, who is a good friend of mine, she is in charge of Rebus community, and she has worked on this book along with the other incredible authors. And you can see that it's really beautifully curated. It really targets on the right things. There's big quotes, there's, glossary terms. But what I really love about this book, other than the way that the book is laid out in the chapters, is that specifically at the end, they have different sorts of quizzes, quizzes that correspond to each chapter, as well as lecture slides that correspond to each chapter. And on Pressbooks, we are flexible. So you'll see that on the platform, she has all of these available on the web book of the book, which is what you're seeing now, which is as the name would suggest, a web version of the book that's available to everybody. In terms of accessibility practices, this is compatible with a screen reader. So if you have students or users or readers who are in need of a screen reader, then they would be able to sufficiently have access to this text by going onto the webbook. And like I said, to continue on with the flexibility of Pressbooks, what I was going to say is that on the webbook, all of these quizzes are available. They're done through, if you don't know, they're called H5p Activities, which are open source interactive tool sets. There's 44 to 45 different kinds of activities, 2 of them being quizzes and lecture slides. Whereas you'll see up here on the download this book option, there's Pressbooks XML and MOBI files and PDFs and EPUBs that whoever comes across this book, like I said, your students or other readers, they can download this book and read. And if you were to download the EPUB or the print PDF, you'll see that these chapters aren't available at the end because lecture slides and quizzes are enabled by JavaScript. So you can't click on things, whereas to finish that sentence, whereas you can't click on, different quizzes and activities and EPUBs or PDFs because they do not correspond to web links. So it's a really, there's so many different ways that you can lay out your book. So I wanted to show this example for that purpose. And then moving on, I wanted to show you an example of a language book. If you follow us, this is funny, but if you follow us on Twitter, our wonderful team member, Lee, has been tweeting about all the wonderful books that she sees, and she's been sending out recommendations on there. And this is a book that I found out through there. This is a book written by the University of Queensland and is an open access educational resource which can be used with a variety of approaches to support intermediate learners of Spanish. So I love this book. I also want to let you know that Pressbook supports many different languages, too many in fact for me to list right now, but even languages that don't use the Latin script. I'm Korean, and if I want to write a book about Korean in Korean, I could declare language support that would allow me to write this book as such. I had a Russian book prepared to demo, and then I realized that I actually cannot read Russian at all. So I thought it'd be better if I could sort of understand or see at least understand the specific letters. So if I hop into a chapter, you'll see that there's a bunch of things that this author did. There's different text boxes and videos, and there's also different activities that are available. So this is a really great way to practice languages. I'm in the process of learning French right now, and I'm about intermediate, and I'm looking for a great resource that could help me read and engage with material by watching videos or following along a quiz, or having a MP3 or an MP4 file that will be perfectly embedded on the webbook so that when I click on it, I can hear how the word is pronounced. So these are all really great ways that you can sort of adapt language resources. I've seen other language examples as well, and if you're interested, like I said, you can always search on the directory itself. I also have a couple of STEM examples. I could not leave it out because I studied chemistry, and it lives it lives strongly in my heart. And here's an example of I believe this is adapted from OpenStax. This book is very widely used at the University of Central Florida, and it's a high enrollment course. And it's a massive book with so many different elements to the book. You can see that as compared to the other books, this book is much, much bigger and is probably used for an introductory class somewhere else. At UCF. I know this book also has been adapted many a times, which is super helpful. And you can see that up here, they've also licensed it CC BY, which means that if you want to reuse this book, then you can really adapt it to fit your needs. And that's something that I'll also cover today. It's, the idea of building your Pressbooks up from the ground as opposed to importing content and cloning an entire book to have a copy of that book on your network. Regardless of however you want to do any of those three things, you can all do them together as well, which I think is, the true beauty about open education at the end of the day, or writing or creating openly licensed content. It's the ability to do, you have sort of endless capability in terms of how you create content. So I want to show you this because if I hop into any chapter, you'll be able to see examples of math. We use a really accessible math tool called Mathjax. There's tables, and it's just a really great book. By making it, I guess UCF didn't make it downloadable. But if you wanted to have a version of this book on your network and make this book downloadable in different modalities, you could. So there's so many different, opportunities for you to develop the book or adapt the book in the ways that you want. And then lastly, I pulled up this example from eCampus Ontario, who create amazing books similar to the Open Education Network. They are a big organization in Canada that work with not all, but lots and lots of Ontario-based colleges and community colleges and universities to make books available in the province of Ontario, which is amazing. So if I hop into a chapter, there's a little less math as compared to the last STEM book that I just showed you, but there's quizzes that you can take along the way that allow you to reuse and embed, and lots of different images that students can learn from as they're going along. So I just wanted to show you all of these examples for you to have an idea of how books are created, even in different disciplines. You're really not limited in any way. I know that, like I said, I didn't have a music example, but if you wanted to, have music, you can create musical notation, you can include MP4 files, you can link YouTube videos. There's so many different ways that you can adapt your book. So I wanted to go through all of those. Does anyone have any questions? Are there any limits to how many chapters and sections you can have per book? And the answer to that question is no. You can have as many chapters and as many sections as you want per book. I actually just realized that the University of Arizona have open textbooks. They have an amazing book in their catalog that they just produced with students. And I had sort of supported them throughout this book making process. And before the professor of this class, Diana, and the network managers of this institution, like Cheryl and Emily, I believe, before they had taken the book and really produced a final copy, they had so many chapters. I believe they had I don't want to misquote, but I think about 30 different chapters, and each student had worked on each individual chapter. So there's really a lot that you can do with it to bring the book together at the end. So yeah, definitely you're not limited. And thank you for sharing that resource, Karen. I appreciate that. Okay, so now that I've sort of demoed different options of books in terms of, formatting math, formatting H5p activities, books in different languages, even a book produced with many different students, I'd like to show you how you can actually use Pressbooks. Like I said, if you're already familiar with Pressbooks, this might be a little bit redundant, but I hope that this is helpful for anyone who has any questions about Pressbooks. I also promise, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you might have. I don't bite, and I'd be happy to answer questions. Yeah. Okay, so starting in my book, I had already went in and created a book. If you've already signed up for the sandbox session, then you will already know how you create a book. So for the sake of time, I won't cover exactly how to create a book, but here's the book that I've created for the session. I've called it OEN 2021 Demo. And if I head into the admin panel, this is where sort of all of the magic happens. And this sort of relates to what I was saying before about how nothing is ever really final on Pressbooks or even in, openly licensed content creation, in the sense that you can always add to it, you can always edit things, you can always amend content as well, which is something that I think is so valuable, especially in this day and age. So I want to describe the 3 different methods of making a book loosely. So I'm very much of a list maker. So I like to, break things down so that I can simplify in my head, so that I see less of a barrier to creation. So firstly is building a book from scratch. Secondly is importing chapters from different places or importing content from different places. And thirdly is cloning, which is what I had mentioned earlier. And all of those things can be used in tandem with one another. So the first thing that I want to show is building a book from scratch. And there are a couple of modules that are really important for you to consider, such as book information. This is where all of the important stuff for your book happens, including adding different contributors to your book. But the parts that I really wanted to show today in terms of accessibility and books for different disciplines, firstly is language. This is the setting in your book that will allow for you to set your metadata of your book into different languages. So that includes all of these buttons here. So read book, the download this book button. So all of the buttons that surround the content of the book, you can edit here. Language and script support is declared elsewhere, which is why, you can see, if I typed in, let's say French, you can see French on here, but when you go and declare language and script support, French won't show up as an option because French, you don't need to declare language and script support for it. So I just wanted to highlight that. And also I wanted to highlight subjects. We recently just improved our subject categorization. So we use the list that's provided by thema. There's so many different topics up here that can all be used in tandem with one another. You can include additional subjects, and they'll all go towards your metadata. And also about licensing. When you create a book, you'll see that by default, the book is licensed as all rights reserved so that you can decide how your book is licensed afterwards. But we offer all of this the Creative Commons licensing under here so that you can use them and you can change them whenever you'd like to fit your needs. So I wanted to quickly cover that just to let you know that that's possible. And then heading into the organize module, this is actually where you will do the bulk of your writing. A book is divided into 3 parts. That's front matter, the body section, the back matter. And if I hop into a chapter that I've created, I made a very quick demo chapter about math. So in this case, you can see for the sake of time, like I said, I won't go through I won't individually demo all of these things, but I wanted to show you what I've done. And hopefully you can sort of work your way backwards and see for yourself how convenient it is to use. So things like, so I've used a header here, so introduction to right angle triangles and trigonometry. You can see I've used Mathjax, which, like I said, is our math tool that we use. Mathjax we integrated Mathjax onto Pressbooks because of how accessible it is. If you right click, you'll see different commands and different zoom factors and different accessibility settings, different language settings, as well as if you're interested in seeing Mathjax, learning more about Mathjax, you can click on this. I also love that the text box is highlighted. It's one of my favorite parts about Mathjax in a weird way. You can see that I've also included my own glossary term and footnote as well. I've also embedded a YouTube video, and I have included a text box with an image, and I've even included a caption and I've hyperlinked it directly back to where I received the image itself. So if we actually go back to the chapter that in the edit mode, you'll see that everything sort of looks the way that it did in the live webbook, but you can also see exactly what I did. So to use Mathjax, it's super simple. You just have to surround your math code or your math rather by these two pieces of shortcode. So square bracket LaTeX, and then you can finish it off by doing reverse slash in square brackets LaTeX, and whatever is in the middle will directly render for you. So in this case, the Pythagorean theorem was beautifully rendered into an image that Mathjax has all of those accessibility settings on. You can also see that I've included a glossary term. It's super simple to create a glossary term. You just have to highlight the word, click glossary, and you can create a description for it. The best part also is that if you are creating a term heavy book and you'd like to be able to refer to the same glossary terms over and over again, then this button is available for you so that you can click it and reuse the term. To create a footnote, you don't even have to highlight, you just have to drop your cursor and click footnote, and you'll get, I don't think you'll be able to see this because it's a web browser pop-up, but you'll see a browser pop-up that says enter your footnote content in here, and it will create your footnote for you. So there is, those are some of the basics on how you can use the different features on the visual editor. I also wanted to mention that this is something that I have outlined in the sandbox session. If you are already familiar with this, feel free to skip over it. But there's a bunch of other stuff up here that might be of interest to you, so I just wanted to let you know. To format a YouTube video, all you have to do is insert directly. It says insert from URL, but you don't even have to do this. So in this case, I had copied and pasted the link of the YouTube video. So in this case, I can do that again. And you can see that it automatically renders for me, which is super, super convenient, so that you don't have to do any extra formatting. You can just copy and paste the link itself, and it will directly paste into the book for you, with no additional attributions because you're only embedding content. Lastly, there's these really lovely visual indicators called text boxes. In this case, I had chosen the example text box. There's no difference between the text boxes, they just vary in color, and you can change the color at any given point. So in this case, I had set a header, I had included an image, and like I said, I included the a link to the original itself, and that's how I attributed it. There are a couple of other ways that you can attribute content as well, and I'll show you that right now. On appearance under theme options, you'll see that you can enable media attributions. And from here, when I save changes, now when I go to visit my book, at the bottom, you will see that the media attribution for this image shows up. I clearly did not change the name of this image, which is why it shows up as such, but I gave it a license. And you can see that when I actually go onto my chapter itself and go into the Add Media module, you'll see that earlier on, I had added a caption for my book, for my image. Let's call this, I'll call it something really boring like math image. I gave it a caption. And I had also included the attributions in the original link. It said CC and CSA, so I gave it that, and that is what I had included. So that is a little bit about how to include content. Like I said, there's different ways that you can attribute your content, but for accessibility purposes and otherwise, and also for copyright purposes, it's super important that you credit the right people for their work. So I just wanted to take you through all of that so that I can show you how the visual editor works. For those of you who don't know, Pressbooks is built on top of WordPress, which makes things WordPress is, I know, a very commonly used tool, and it's known to be relatively user-friendly. So if you're recognizing a lot of these modules, that might be why. And I hope that it aids your understanding of what's going on in Pressbooks. And the last thing that I want to show you on here is a revisions tool. On the right-hand side, you'll see this button that says revisions. And when you go through browse, you'll see different autosaves and purposeful saves that you have made. And what's so lovely about this is that not only can you save, of course you can save, but you can also see, sorry, let me restart that sentence. Not only sometimes there's an autosave. You can also go back on the saves that have been made. So let's say, you know, I made an edit 6 months ago and I think, oh, I actually do want that in my book. I can refer back to there. I can see what I've removed. I can repaste, recopy, and paste that into a newer version of the book that I'm working on. So it's really convenient. You can also restore different versions if you want to restore a revision. So I'd recommend that you save often if you are a fan of going back on something that you've done before. So that is a little bit about a truncated introduction into Pressbooks for any of you who aren't yet familiar with Pressbooks. I see that there's a question in the chat. Oh, it's just Karen dropping another lovely guide chapter. So I hope that's helpful. That's a good guide chapter. So yeah. From here, let's say that you you know, you're supporting a faculty member, or you are a faculty member, or you're, you know, even a student who's been assigned to write something on Pressbooks, but you had already started it, you know, on Microsoft Word, or you know, you had been working on another Pressbooks book. How can I bring that content onto this book? Well, we have a tool called Import, and on the bottom of the left-hand side dashboard bar, there's a button called Tools, and within Tools, there's a button called Import. And this import tool allows you to bring in different content from all of these different import types. So EPUB, Word, Microsoft Word, excuse me, other Pressbooks webbooks. So in this case, I found this book. It's this intermediate algebra book. And let's say that I wanted to bring over a chapter. And all I'd have to do is click on web page, click on import from URL, and I begin import. And what this will do is Pressbooks will read the content of the other book, and it will show me all of the chapters that I can import into my book. Something else that's really great is that this book is, it's always really important to adhere or to look at the copyright license before you bring content over. You know, if it's CC BY and CSA, then you will have to attribute it, you know, similarly, and all that stuff. So I would recommend that if you're less familiar with them, to have a look. And you can see now that the importing tool has read the content of this book, and it's giving me all of the chapters that it sees. And from here, let's say I just want to bring in these 2 chapters, and I want them to stay as chapters. If I want them to go to parts or back matter, I can also set them as such. But from here, I'll click Import in Selection. And it's just going to take some time to import. I think this is not a huge book, but relatively large. So it will take just a second. Does anyone have any questions in the meantime? Great. I think I may have accidentally selected way too many chapters, but it's going. But generally, you get the idea. When you import content, then you'll have those certain chapters. But like I said, this can be applied to other, you know, file formats like Word. And at the end of the day, if you find a PDF, PDFs are, you can't import PDFs because PDFs are notoriously difficult. That is anyone who's worked with PDFs will know that that is a universal fact. You can also always copy and paste directly into Pressbox, and that's definitely a way that you can bring content in. So there's so much flexibility that you have on, you know, adjusting content and having content as such. Something else that I'd like to cover in this time is the cloning tool. So while we're waiting for that extremely long import, I don't know why it's taking so long, is that here you can see that we have a clone of the book that I had just copied over from. So there is a couple of differences between cloning and importing. Importing allows you to bring in content separately, so individually, one at a time. You know, if you wanted to bring over you know, a couple of chapters from another book, and you want to do that for many different books, and you'd be able to do so. But let's say that I really want this book from BC Campus on my network. in its entirety, then I can bring over the book as a clone. I don't know why this image wasn't brought over, but you can see that this looks exactly like how it did on here. Although it looks like, of course, it's during the middle of a demo that something goes wrong. But this test instance university.pressbooks.pub is typically where we test from. So maybe our developers had deployed a change that hasn't gone to other networks, but I promise cloning works typically perfectly with all of the content brought over. So that includes images and H5p activities, glossary terms, all of that will be perfectly cloned on here. And depending on the license of the book, so in this case, it's a CC BY, then you'd be able to make as many adaptations as you'd like. So if I actually go back to this chapter, you'll see that all of those chapters that this person had written, then you can see that these chapters have been brought in perfectly. And from here, I'd be able to do things like, adjust the content within the chapters, or if I decide that I don't want a chapter, I can just remove it entirely. So in between, so this is sort of what I was going towards, is the idea that you can really use all of these tools. So writing a chapter yourself, bringing in content from elsewhere, and cloning all together. So from this clone book, what I can do is bring over the chapters that I had written, or my or the chapters that I had imported directly into my clone book, or vice versa. So super convenient. And all clone books at the bottom of the book have a book source attribution. And you can see here that it will take me back to the original. So you can even see that this book that this person had written isn't the original. This is the original. So there's the book source attribution is really great, so that you can see exactly where the original came from. And if you write content and you openly licensed it, it will be credited if someone else decides to clone the content as well. So this is super helpful. There's a couple of other things related to cloning that might be super helpful for you. Under appearance and then theme options, we created this tool specifically for educational institutions. You will see this button that says enable source comparison. And what that will allow you to observe is go into your clone book. And if you go into a chapter, also, if you're seeing all of this unformatted math, it's because they're using a different math tool. So all of it will render as long as you're using the right math tool. That won't be covered today. But if you are nervous about all of the janky math you're seeing, they're just using the WordPress default math tool. So going down to here, this is what I had enabled. So this is called, the button is called show source comparison with your original. And you'll be able to see all of the different content that was removed and added. So it shows you the raw text as well, which is why you're seeing so many changes. But this also means that, if you have a book, what this will allow you to do is, if you're making changes, you can see exactly the difference between this text, and it's pulling from the current version of the text from which it was adapted. So it's looking at this direct book. So this is a super useful tool to have, depending on what use you're using your book for, makes it super convenient for you to track the changes that are being made, or to see what kind of work that your students are putting into a cloned book. Obviously, source comparisons are useful for many variety of different reasons. And then heading down here, I wanted to show you the themes that are available. So these are all of the different themes on Pressbooks. Everything in this module, so themes, theme options, these are the overlay to the book itself. So you can change the theme at any given time, and none of your content will change. This will only affect the way that your book looks. So if you decide to, enable Andreasen, and then, you don't like it, so you go back to Mcluhan, you can do that at any given point. There's a couple of themes in here that are specifically that are used specifically for educational purposes. Typically, Malala, for example, is our newest theme. There's a variety of different fonts available on Malala and different colors, as you can see, as opposed to all the other black and white themes. Graham and Jacobs are also used really frequently. Mcluhan is our sort of premier theme, just like it's the first one that we ever created, and it's the one that we make the most amount of updates and changes to, so it's great to use. The Andreasen theme also has color like the Malala theme. The Andreasen theme was actually developed for the Tufts Medical School, who are a client of ours. So I think that's great, just because it indicates that perhaps it would be useful for certain disciplines. So yeah, I just wanted to show you this. It's kind of a fun part of the bookmaking process. And there's also a bunch of theme options as well. So like I said, I had enabled media attributions on the demo book that I created. You can also set different, PDF options. If you'd like your book to be a manual or a syllabus, then you might want to set your book to a smaller size. Whereas if it's, a full-on book, I know that the Wisconsin Technical Colleges and Schools Consortium they are creating this incredible nursing resource, but the book is about 900 pages long that's being written on Pressbooks. So they've set their book to a really large size with very small margins, so that when they print their book, it's not, it's 700 pages instead of 900 pages. So that's an example of how you might find this suitable for your needs. You can also change text box colors. So all of this is available for you to use and to have and to change whenever you'd like to, modify your book to yeah. So that sort of rounds out all of the things that I want to show you on the dashboard. Once you're ready to export your book, you can export your book on here. There are different formats that are readable. So like other than the web book, which you don't need to export to see, you also have PDFs, you have EPUBs, you have MOBIs, and you also have other formats. So you have all the sort of adaptable quote unquote formats for if you want to, upload this onto another Pressbook site. There's also XHTMLs available for you, open document files available. And you also have the option to download the file into Common Cartridge with web links. I know in this day and age, lots of people like to have one place where their students can read from. And I know that reading through the LMS is a very popular choice. So if you'd like to use that, I hope that is helpful. And yeah, this is where you can download all of those. And then if you'd like to make those downloads available on the home page, what you can do is go down to settings and go to sharing and privacy and click yes and click save changes just under share latest export file and go to visit book. Oh, I didn't actually export anything. That's the issue. But let's say I did export this book. And then now that button's enabled, what this will allow me to do is show my EPUB on the home page. So this module directly corresponds with the sharing and privacy, the share latest export files module. And in terms of sharing your book on the directory or on your catalog, any book that's over 1,500 words by default will be in the directory. You can choose to remove from the directory if you'd like. But now you can see that this book is available in EPUB. So there's a variety of different ways that you can distribute your book. Touching on accessibility, it's obviously super important that you make your book, unless your book is for a very specific purpose, you're meaning for it to be printed. I think me and the people that I work with at Pressbox are all of the mindset that it'd be really great if every book was available in every modality, but that option is there for you if you'd like to take it and have your book in many different formats. That's available to all. So that covers all of the basic frameworks of Pressbooks. I hope that that's sort of comprehensive. In the next 10 minutes, I'll take a moment to show you all of the sort of fun things that you can do with Pressbooks, especially in terms of different sorts of quizzes and activities to fit. If you're a STEM instructor and you want to have a math quiz, or if you are a language instructor and you want to do a vocabulary test, all of those different activities through H5p and also a comprehensive learning experience, so to speak, through Hypothesis. So here,
Amy,
yes.
Hi, sorry to interrupt. You've been sharing such great information with us. And I just wanted, before you move on to H5p and other interactivity, if we could please go back to the dashboard view just for a moment. Behind the scenes. Yes, thank you. I just wanted to check in and see if there were any questions on, importing from different file types, exporting to different file types. Amy talked about cloning. There was just a lot of information. And so I wanted to check in with the group and see if there's anything anyone would like to see again, including how to organize the front matter, back matter, main body. Just wanted to pause and check in. So I will stop talking and look at the chat, or feel free to unmute if you do have questions. Let's see. Jonathan's asking the difference between cloning and importing.
Yeah, I'd love to clarify. There are a couple of primary differences between cloning and importing. Cloning will create an entire copy of a book that exists on the Pressbooks network. So cloning is a process in which our API, which I do not tech speak, but API, just a fancy word for our system, will pull every information from another Pressbooks book onto your Pressbooks network to create an exact copy of that book. So for example, if you're trying to clone from a CCBY book, Pressbooks will allow you to clone it through this cloning feature here. It says clone a book. But if you try to clone a book from an all rights reserved book, it won't let you. So Pressbooks know it's a Pressbooks book. If you also try to clone a book from a different link, like an OpenStax book, it won't let you clone. So cloning a book is really meant to create an exact copy, including all of the metadata, H5p activities, glossary terms, images, anything that you can think of from another Pressbooks book. Whereas the importing tool can be done on a clone book, on an original book, on any kind of book really. And it's a process in which you bring in a specific part from another book, whether that's a Pressbooks book, whether that is an EPUB that you have available from, somewhere entirely different. And you can import into, like I said, any sort of book as long as it follows this file type here. The challenge with importing is that it won't bring over H5p activities. It won't bring over it will bring over images and glossary terms, but it won't bring over H5p activities and also any different file types that it can't understand. The importing tool tries its best to understand the file that it's reading. Obviously, if it's a Pressbooks file, then it will understand it best. So those are the primary differences. One creates an entirely new copy and the other one doesn't, but it allows you to pick and choose what you want to bring over, and you can also bring in content from non-Pressbooks places. I hope that clarifies the difference.
Thanks, Amy. Do you have a recommendation on which files kind of work best for import? Let's say somebody's trying to bring over something from Google Docs. Which one of those options kind of requires the least amount of cleanup?
I would say that the glaringly obvious answer is bringing content over from Pressbooks, but otherwise I would say probably Microsoft Word is easiest, just because it's so commonly used, and we've probably put in the most amount of work into making it work, and also OpenOffice. I would say with EPUBs, they're a little more challenging. Like I said, the Pressbooks import tool tries its best to read the content, but it might not be able to understand all of it, especially with things like Google Docs. Google Docs files can't be imported onto Pressbooks because they don't take the same form as a Microsoft Word document. So in the case of something like Google Docs, what I would recommend is to just copy and paste into your book. Obviously not the most convenient, but it does get the job done fairly well. And that's what I think that's what I would recommend. But it seems like most people typically use Microsoft Word anyways. What I will say is that on the guide, there is a guide chapter about how you can format your Word document best so that when it comes on Pressbooks, you have a lesser amount of cleanup to do. So I would recommend that you refer to that.
Oh, that's good to know. And I do know there are programs out there where they work with students on the copy and paste process in order to bring over content from Google Docs or other file types. So Stacy's asking, you could export a Google Doc into Word, then import the resulting Word doc, right?
Yeah, you absolutely could. I think that's sort of the best way to do it if you want to bring over a Google Doc, but you can't, you can't explicitly bring a Google Doc document over. Yeah.
And then Amy, I just had a quick question on metadata. You showed us
Mhm.
all of the subjects that it's possible to add for a particular book. And
Yeah.
that's really helpful for us as we add books to the open textbook
Mhm.
library. You know, sometimes a subject area is obvious. Of course, sometimes one book may fall into multiple subject areas, and we are not experts in those areas. So for anyone who wants to include something published in Pressbooks in the OTL, I encourage you to include that metadata because it is something that Yui, our student assistant in the OTL, and I will use in adding books to the library. So Amy, I assume that that appears in the footer with some of the other data. Is that the case? Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for allowing my inelegant interruption, and I'll hand things back over.
No, it was very elegant, and all of those questions were super valuable. So I do a lot of demos, so it's sometimes great to reflect on. This is, these are the commonly asked questions, so I really appreciate you bringing them up. So I want to round out the demo portion of this session by showing you, like I said, how you can enable H5p activities and hypothesis. Obviously, very fun tools to have in your book. And then I'll touch on accessibility. We'll take a 5-minute break, and then whoever wants to come back for the sandbox can. I don't know how long you'll have sandbox access for. That's up to Karen to decide. But there will be a document prepared. So if the session runs long for whatever reason and anyone is interested in continuing on with the sandbox session after, you'll have that document. And there's a list of instructions that you can follow so that there's more of a guided practice to the sandbox. But with that being said, I'll hop back into my demo book. And from here, I'll do a couple of other. I will turn on the settings for H5p and hypothesis so that you can see what it looks like. So on the left-hand side, you will see that there is this button that says H5p content. If you don't see that content button, what you can do is go up to plugins and you can activate H5p on your book. And you'll see that all of a sudden, once you click activate, that you'll see this button that says H5p content on the left-hand side, and you're ready to go. So from here, I click add new, and it gives me a consent note, and I say I consent, give me the hub, and you'll see this beautiful H5p hub that gives you many different kinds of activities that you can see. One of my favorite activities is an image slider. I'm so easily entertained by this. And if you like what you see, you can click install, and now you'll have it on your book. And I love this because you have different examples, and you can also go into the H5p site by clicking content demo, and you'll be able to see all of the images. Wow, doesn't that look amazing? You can see all of the examples that they have laid out. And you can see how the tool is used exactly. And yeah, so you I would recommend that you explore this tool and see what's possible for your discipline. I know that lots of image-based activities especially are used for life sciences and language learning in terms of different vocabulary words. There's also for classes that are English literature, or like I said, even language classes. You can see different solutions. There's lots of different ways that you can enable feedback. And what I love so much about these activities is that they're accessible, and we at Pressbooks also love working with other organizations that are like us. And what's so great about H5p is that they are not only open source, but they're also very accessible. So they've enabled these things called behavioral settings. So from here, when you click install and I click use, it gives me instructions on exactly how I can use this. So here they gave me, so I just copied and pasted the demo example. I can give it a feedback add range. So let's say, and I can say keep going, and I can say correct. But you can see these behavioral settings down here. So you can enable retry or enable show solution. You can show whether or not it's case sensitive. And there's so many different ways that you can configure the activity to fit your needs. And from here, when I click create, you can see the way that this example is set. So I can say Norway and I can click check and it gives me the answer that I'm looking for. It gives me the prompt that I had included for the usership. And at the bottom, there's also these really useful tools for reuse. So like I showed you at the beginning, you can download this as an H5p file and reuse it in your book, or you can embed into your book. So you can use an iframe instead. And in the organize module, you'll find that in any given chapter, above the chapter, you'll see after you've enabled H5p, you'll see this button that says add H5p. So from here, you can add all of your H5p activities. And not only is the reuse button in this case super important so that other people can use your content, it's also important because if you find an example elsewhere that you want to use, you can also use this content on your book. So you just have to download the content and click upload, and you can choose any file that says H5p. So in this case, I have a random example of glucose regulation. And when I click use, I will see that there's all of these questions that someone else had created that I have successfully uploaded. I see that there's a lot of questions in the chat. So let me look, although I don't think any questions were specifically about H5p.
Jonathan had one. He asked if one can use LaTeX math displayed with Mathjax as usual inside an H5p activity that has text.
Yes, absolutely, Jonathan. That's a great question and something that I wanted to mention. You can absolutely use LaTeX with Mathjax inside of an H5p activity, and it works really well. And I see this very commonly used when I was looking actually for an example of a STEM book. I did not have time to find one prior to this session. But yes, if you look around in the directory, you'll find a bunch of examples of books with H5p activities. Exactly, yes. I would have loved to have that as a chemistry student. Okay, I hope that answers everyone's questions for now. Please feel free to unmute or to let me know in the chat if you need any help answering any of your questions.
I think there's another one here, and you may have covered it while I was scrolling through the chat. Is there a way to import? I publish my sample quizzes as text with solutions added. Can I bulk import these and then pick for each chapter?
That's a great question, Esme. I don't. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think I mispronounced your name. My apologies. You can absolutely import content. You can just go to upload next to create content and upload the H5p activity. You can't bulk upload, but once you have them, they'll all show up under all H5p content. And then from here, you can pull them directly into your chapter. So yes, you can import, but you cannot bulk import. So I hope that's helpful. Okay, so that is a little bit about H5p. The last thing that I wanted to cover here is that when you're creating your activity, you'll see that there's a little button called metadata next to the title. So just like attributing anything, you can also include extra metadata. You'll see that when you include metadata, you'll see the rights of use once you open it. So that is that's an example of how you can add that content. And also, if you don't want to make your activities open licensed or shareable, you can also set it as all rights reserved, and the reuse button will automatically disappear. So that is a little bit about H5p. And then the last thing that I wanted to cover here is hypothesis. So hypothesis, unlike H5p that you might have to enable on plugins, hypothesis is already enabled. You just can't see it because you have to turn it on yourself. So that was a confusing description, but you don't have to enable it on plugins. It's already, like I said, already enabled by default. You just have to turn it on for particular parts of your book. So under settings, you'll see hypothesis. It will be there by default. And you just have to turn it on for certain places. So like allow on chapters, allow on parts. So in this case, I'll click allow on chapters because that's sort of the only place, let's say I want to make annotations. On here, I'll click save. And when I go to visit my book and hop into a chapter, you can see that the hypothesis bar has actually been enabled on the right-hand side. So from here, you'll click log in. You will have to create an account for Hypothesis, but this is really great because it means that you can make annotations everywhere across the web where Hypothesis is being used. And all you have to do to annotate is to highlight something. And, oh, I did not mean to click highlight. I meant to click annotate, and I can make my annotation. So I might say, I'm confused about this topic to review. So from here, what I can do is post to only myself. So maybe if I'm studying for this class, then I can post this as an annotation to myself in the way that you would, highlight in a typical textbook or in a traditional textbook. Or let's say that this is a class-based discussion. What I could do is post to public, and now everyone can see my annotation. Super convenient, because if you also want to create private groups, let's say you are an instructor and you have 40 students and you want 8 of them in 5 groups each, 8 people in 5 of each group, and you want them to have a discussion on each of the groups, then you'd be able to create different breakout rooms and have them participate in that content there. You can make page notes if you want to leave instructions for your students, or let's say you're using your book and you want your book to be annotated and read by other instructors, or your project manager, or you're a project manager and you want feedback from your instructor, then you can have a discussion on Hypothesis. And then when you're ready, you can and you don't plan on having Hypothesis, you just have to disable it for the chapter, and then your students won't be able to see those annotations. So all of that is possible. What I love about Hypothesis is that they're also a great open source company, organization that do incredible work, but also that it really is not just an annotation tool. There's so much that you can really do with Hypothesis, and I think that's one of the most beautiful parts about the way that it can be used. So with that being said, I'm going to head into the last part of this demo, and the last part of this demo is about accessibility. I'm going to share a different screen that I have, which is back here. So I just want to touch on this because this is something that I've sort of been trying to highlight during the session, and good practices should always be a part of writing and creating content. And I have these 3 great resources here that I'll copy and paste for you in the chat. So Ryerson University is a big university in Canada, and they have a school on continuing education, and they have digital accessibility learning and teaching and learning resources. And they're about different sorts of tech concepts, and they even have a game down here if you're interested in learning about any of these concepts. This book from OpenText BC has sort of become the Bible of accessibility, which I think is really fun. And they have, I still refer to this book even to this day, about best practices on all of these different subjects that sort of might be confusing. And then we also have a Pressbooks guide chapter about accessibility and universal design, on how you can publish accessible content. It links out to different resources, and it also shows you the different accessibility elements of Pressbooks itself. At Pressbooks, we have tried to make sure that the platform is as accessible as possible. So we have an official accessibility policy. We have a VPAT, which is a document with compatibility for accessibility guidelines. And the Ontario College of Art and Design in Canada have also helped us follow accessibility guidelines for the platform so that it is as accessible to as many people as possible. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. The next office hours will be on evaluating OER accessibility. I should attend that. That would be so great. So that sort of rounds out the session. I know that it was rather long, but I hope that this was helpful. And I'll stop sharing my screen. And Karen, you can stop the recording. Okay, so something that I have written up this document. This is the sandbox instructions for OEM Pressbox. There you go. I had forgotten that word. I'm going to share this with you in the chat. It should be opened to everybody. Anyone with link, there we go. So I'm going to copy and paste this link. And it's now in the chat for everybody. And you can follow this along in your own time. These are a general set of instructions. It's not just for this session. These are just a good list of rules to follow and correspond to what I showed you today. So this is, yeah, like I said, just a general set of instructions that you can follow to get familiar with Pressbooks. I've included some guide chapters in a lot of these, in a lot of the subheadings under here. So for like including H5p activities and enabling hypothesis, there's different guide chapters. There's also different resources down here. We have a guide, we have a YouTube channel. You can see our product manager Steele does a lot of product webinars, but there's also these really short videos that, like I said, our new support member, Gavin, has done. They're really short and really sweet and just overall just super fantastic. And we're so lucky that these videos now exist. So I would really, if you're interested in learning visually, all of this can be found. So the bulk of what we covered today is in Pressbook's authoring and editing platform, as well as cloning and adapting OER with PressbookEDU. And we also have Pressbook's webinars down here so that if you are interested in learning live, anyone can register for these webinars, and you can watch me give this demo, but across 2 sessions, and you can register for them. They happen every month. So I would recommend that you log into Pressbooks and get started by following these chapters. You just have to log in and click create a new book, and then you should be ready to go. I will be here. I just didn't want to walk you through it because I know we don't have that much time, but I will be here, Karen will be here, and Barb will be here. So if any of you have questions as you're going through it, please feel free to ask. But I hope these are clear enough instructions, and if they're not, like I said, we're here to support you. So that's all I want to say. But yeah. Okay, let's re-navigate to this book. I have so many books going on. So from here, create a new book. All you'd have to do if you don't have a Sandbox network yet is go under My Books, and you'll be led to this interface. You can create a new book, set a webbook address, set a book title. The privacy settings shouldn't matter too much, and then you can click create a new book. Once you create a new book, you'll be led to this. Sorry, Karen, yes?
Sorry, I'm asking so many questions.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations on creating good book titles?
I don't. That's a great question. I've never been asked that before. Obviously for, especially for SEO purposes, not SEO, but in terms of, search friendliness, I would recommend not making your book title super, super long. Being succinct, but also descriptive, I think is super important. That's sort of my only advice. I think it really depends on the discipline and what you're intending for your book to be. Some book titles are super elaborate because it's for this one niche syllabus for one class of 1 year, but generally in terms of making titles, I would say, succinct and descriptive is sort of a good principle. But the nice part is that you can change your book title at any given time. So if you don't like the title of your book, you can always change it by going to book information, and you'll see that at the very top, you see title, so you can change it when necessary. So that is, that's how you create your book. You can see that your global privacy is up here. I didn't cover this during the session, but public just means that you can set your book, when your book is set to public, it means that this book is accessible to everybody. So if any of you were to navigate to university.pub/OEN 2021 demo, you'd be able to see this book. Whereas if I click private, it means that now when you visit the book, it'll say access denied. So that's the difference between public and private. And yeah, so that's something that I wanted to go through that I didn't get to cover during the session. So the first step is exploring the visual editor. So this is called the Pressbook's authoring and editing platform. And then within it is the visual editor. There's also the text editor if you really like formatting with HTML. I have yet to meet someone who said that, but if you are, that makes you incredibly cool and very accomplished, and I commend you. But I feel like for the most part, visual editors are so great because it's so convenient to navigate your way around. have a look at tables, you know, have a look at the text boxes, have a look at the headings, add different images, try, especially for accessibility purposes, add an alt text. This is what the screen reader will read. Same with captions and including attributions. I would also encourage you to add a YouTube video and use the revisions tool to see the changes that you've made. I know there was a comment about glossary. Try including a glossary term or footnote. If you are using STEM or math for any purpose, try formatting with Mathjax. If you're interested in Mathjax, under settings, you'll see that the Mathjax tool is here, so you can explore more into how you can potentially use a math tool. So exploring the visual editor is really all the components inside Organize. You can also drag chapters and reorganize the book to your liking, which is why it's called the Organize module. You can also switch up the look of your book by going to the Appearance module and going into themes and theme options. So this is a really great way to explore what your book will look like. Changing up the appearance, like I said, you can do so without making any changes to the content of your book, including web options and PDF and ebook options. All of these are here. And there is also once you're ready and you're happy with your book, then you can export your book into different formats. So click on some of the formats that you'd like to see and click export your book. And from here, you can, look at the PDF to see how you like it. You can look at the EPUB to see, how the theme turned out, because the theme translates onto the PDF and EPUB beautifully as well. If you'd like to explore how this looks on, your canvas, then you can export a common cartridge with web links and import the web links version into your book. And then these are sort of the core Pressbooks functions. And then we have some other sort of higher level features, hopefully not anything too complicated. Firstly is exploring the directory. So have a look at the directory, see what you can find, see what you can take away from it. Look at other books that share the same discipline as yours, and have a better idea of how other creators and faculty and librarians and managers have created content. And then from here, you can find a work on the directory to adapt. So let's say that I really like this Beginning to Intermediate Excel. This is a great book. I think everyone, there's a world to Excel that none of us know about, unless you are an Excel whiz, in which case perhaps you don't need this book, but maybe I should have a read through it. But from here, I can see that it's a CC BY licensed book. And if I wanted to take this book and import this into my book, like I showed you through the import tool, go to Tools, go to Import, and then select Pressbooks Webbook. And you can copy and paste the link to this book, and I can choose however many chapters and parts I want to bring over. So that is a step that I've included. You can also, a step that I did not include on this, just because I didn't know if everyone had access to clone. If you're on a sandbox network, so for example, if your institution is participating through OEN, and if you only get one sandbox book, then you won't be able to clone. So that's why I didn't include the instructions. But if you already have access to Pressbooks, or you can create many books, then you can also explore the cloning tool. Like I said, if you want instructions for cloning, you can find it on our YouTube channel. It's one of the videos that I said in a video series that Gavin had created. And then the last two things that I wanted to round out with were H5p Activities and Hypothesis. Like I had mentioned with H5p, you can go into the plugins menu and activate H5p. And on the left-hand side, you'll find H5p content. And you can click Add New. And look at the different activities that are available. By clicking on the activity itself, you'll get a demo of the activity. You can click on Content Demo. You can also see activities and screenshots. And if you think that you want to use this tool, you can just click Get. If you click Get and you don't want to use it, you don't have to use it. If you're already creating H5p content, as someone had mentioned earlier, then you can go to Upload. and upload your H5p file. You can further adapt it to fit your needs. You can find an H5p file that you find somewhere within a book in the directory, wherever, as long as it's, you know, a .h5p file, you can use it. And then the last thing is, unlike H5p, hypothesis is enabled by default. So by going to settings and going into hypothesis, you just have to enable it on the content settings. So different parts of your book where you'd like it, you can select it to fit your needs. And then when you select and click save, then whichever part you've selected, whichever section you've selected it for, it will be automatically enabled on. So you'll find here that hypothesis is enabled on this chapter. You can create an account. You have to create an account in order to use hypothesis. And you can, once you've created an account, all you have to do is highlight, and now you'll be able to annotate. So I hope that's a.
Is that an account with hypothesis, or is that an account with the Pressbook site for the entity?
A great question. You have to create an account with hypothesis because hypothesis and H5p and Pressbox are all different tools. So the reason why hypothesis makes you create an account is because it's not a tool it's embedded on top of Pressbooks, but you can see that it's not a tool that's directly in the editing interface. And in order for you to annotate, you have to have an account through hypothesis so that you can create annotations. And like I said, it might seem inconvenient to start with, but it's actually really convenient because by having an account with hypothesis, it means that you can create annotations across the web outside of Pressbooks, wherever hypothesis is being used.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And if you were using hypothesis with your students, which I know some instructors do, they would also need to create an account. So it's, you know, an account per person.
Does anyone have any other questions in the last 2 minutes of the session?
I do. I'm just playing around with a book that I've been sort of using as my learning tool for a while. And I'm just wondering, in Organize, is there a faster way of moving content from one section to another other than the move up and move down?
That's a great question. No, not particularly. The way that you'd move a bulk level of content is to move it up or down. But if you know exactly what you'd like to, here, let me go back so that I can reshare my screen. But if you know exactly where you'd want your book to, oh yes, sorry, I got confused there for a second. Yeah, that is the only way that you can move content for now, which I know is a little bit cumbersome.
Right, and I'm also saying, like, I have one thing that is currently within the content area, and I would like to move it. It would be better in the back matter.
Yes,
it doesn't seem that there's a way to move from the content to the back matter.
Yes, like unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't move between the three parts. So front matter stays front matter, body section stays body section, and back matter stays back matter. But what you can do is just re-import the chapter, like download the book or copy the link of the book itself and go to the import tool. And when you import the same book, you can just set the chapter to back matter, and then it will automatically import into the back matter.
Right. Okay. I just didn't know if there was another way.
Exactly. A shortcut.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, of course.
Well, we've made it to the end of our 90 minutes. Thank you, Stacy and Emez, for your questions, and Heather for sticking it out. The three of you stayed with us, and we very much appreciate your time with us. Please join me in thanking Amy for her time and expertise from Pressbooks, and hope to see you all again soon. And many thanks, Amy.
Thanks so much, everybody. Best of luck with all of your projects, and you're in great hands at the Open Education Network. And if you use Pressbooks at your institution, I'm sure that you will be very well supported there. And if you have any questions, feel free to come to our webinars, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Farewell, everybody.